As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest tonight, Bix Weir, founder of RoadToRuta.com, well-known commentator on the precious metals markets and on the world economy and on political realities. Bix is back here with us again on Reluctant Preppers. Thanks for joining us again, Bix.
Hey, it's nice to be here, Dunnigan.
If we could start off today, because the last several weeks have been quite exciting for people who watch precious metals market action after struggling some in the previous month. Precious metals have been showing renewed strength, bouncing off recent support levels and retesting recent breakthrough points. If you could give us your insight into what is going on in precious metals markets, and what do you think are the macro factors that are driving the current action?
Oh, I think it's a complete sideshow. I don't think there are any precious metal markets. There are precious metal derivative markets on the COMEX and the LBMA. I mean, that's what decides price, not how much silver people are buying or gold people are buying or selling. It's got nothing to do with it. And you can tell by the volumes. In silver, over 500 billion ounces of electronic silver are traded on these markets. And, you know, there's not even 500 billion ounces that have ever traded in the history of the world. So there's a complete disconnect. So anything you see as far as pricing in silver or gold has nothing to do with, you know, breaking trends or finding support or anything like that. 99% of these trades are electronic trades back and forth to these people who control the markets. So yeah, I take it as a sign that they want to get people excited for some reason. Everything else is a sign that the world's falling apart. And yeah, it's got nothing to do with the amount of physical metal available or the amount of, you know, people trying to get in to buy. It's got everything to do with derivatives.
In that kind of an environment, we've certainly got a lot of posturing and sort of playing out of scripts that's going on in the political arena with the Britain potential exit from the Eurozone and the U.S. political presidential race. So could you give us your insight into what you think each of those two is doing to influence sort of the powers that be that are doing this manipulation you described?
Well, I think it's part of the plan. There's summer from hell that they're unleashing on the people now. It'll get a lot worse. It'll get crazy worse. I believe they have lots of plans to put in paid instigators right around the political party agendas going on at the end of July, the conventions. There has been leaked documents coming directly from the Attorney General of the U.S. to the Black Lives Matter people that said, okay, you know, we're going to get thousands of people there and we're going to disrupt everything that goes on. And I think it's on both sides, on the Clinton side and especially on the Trump side. And it's part of the summer from hell. They know the system is collapsing. Both the good guys and the bad guys want it to collapse. The question is, are we going to turn to our government for help after that happens, or are we going to go out on our own, which we have absolutely no skills in doing, which scares me even worse. So yeah, this is the end game. And you know, if we even have an election come November, I don't think it'll really matter much, because we'll be looking at banks collapsing and everybody losing their savings and, you know, no checking accounts, savings accounts, 401ks, and everybody will be saying, well, how do we go forward? That's the biggest question, and the government will come in and say, you know, give me all your liberties and freedoms, and you know, you can work with us, and we'll help you forward. And we know how that ends. It doesn't end pretty for the freedom of people in America or anywhere in the world. I think the U.S. is kind of leading this transition, and we'll be the first ones to be asked to either stand up and say no to these oligarchs and bankers who control us, or we might say, yeah, you know, we know we can't provide ourselves with food and water and power and electricity and a social system and security, we know we have to go back to these oligarchs in the power structure. It might be presented in a different form, but it's the same people behind the scenes. So I'm hoping we stand up and say, no more. It will mean great hardship for everybody in the world, but it will be us making the decision and us deciding to move forward on our own without the control of the nanny state.
And moving beyond the U.S. borders, can you talk a little bit about what you think is going on in Britain with their potential exit from the EU, which they vote could be as early as in the next week here?
Well, I don't think it matters at all, other than the derivatives that will be set loose. The bad guys are looking for a reason to blame for the implosion. Not that they mismanaged it over these last 100 years, but rather they can blame the British people if the European banks go down because of the Brexit vote. If you look at what that Britain belonging to the EU, there's a great movie out on it. And it basically it's nothing. The EU has treaties with everybody in the world. There's no advantage to being in the EU for Great Britain. What they do get is they get a lot of rules and regulations, like mountains of rules and regulations. But there is no advantage. The EU will trade with anybody, just like everybody else. But what it might do, it might trigger some derivatives in the European banks, and it might give other countries within the European Union, the balls to stand up and say, "Yeah, I want to leave too," and then it all crumbles. So it's interesting, but I think it's more the bad guys saying, "Hey, we can blame this Brexit thing for the trouble that we know that we have caused and built over these last 100 years."
If we could turn our attention now to a more fundamental or philosophical question about prepping in general and the attitude that people who are sound money enthusiasts, as part of their preparedness, bring towards the world in general or potential of an upcoming collapse. We had a very interesting comment on our channel on a recent interview where the comment was made basically as, don't wish for the end of the world. Go ahead and do your preparedness, but for goodness sakes, don't wish for a collapse of everything that we know. And it really got me thinking. First of all, I thought this person really doesn't think about the things the same way that I do. But then the more I thought about it, the more I could respect and appreciate at least where they're coming from, because it often seems that we talk about contrarian investing. If you're going to win, you've got to go against the herd. If you're going to go against the herd, you've got to be thinking, buying when there's blood in the streets and selling when everything else is frothy and euphoria. And the point of that is not greed for us as reluctant preppers. The point of all of it is to try to be aware so that we can be prepared and we can reduce the unnecessary risk to our family's life and livelihood. So I don't know of anybody, frankly, who's wishing for the end of the world or wishing for a collapse for its own sake. But it really got me thinking about why is it that people who are precious metals enthusiasts do seem to get energized when they see cracks in the wall and they start to see things starting to fall apart from the powers that be that are manipulating things. And it occurred to me that maybe what it's more about is honesty and truthfulness and reality, that if we're really living, if our governments of the world on a fiat currency systems and debt-based have leveraged, and the banks have leveraged things to the hilt, and they've carved out all of the capital that was set aside by people in the Social Security Trust Fund and what the gold holdings that were supposed to be in Fort Knox and everything else that was supposed to be solid and real and something that was a foundation that we could build our futures on for future generations. If all of that's been squandered and leveraged and leased out and derivatives against it, then all we have left is this illusion and this sort of a Walking Dead that's been carved out, hollowed out corpse in a bubble. Gregor Mannarino talks about betting against the debt, but if all we have left is what is false, then what I hear people wishing for as preppers is, number one, I don't want to be caught as a victim of the fallout when that house of cards comes tumbling down, because it isn't built on a solid foundation, and it will come tumbling down. But secondly, when that happens, I sense that people are looking forward to something that's more real and more solid and more higher integrity, and not just based on deceit and treachery and that sort of thing. But I really would like to get your input on that. Are people who are seeking preparedness, are sound money enthusiasts really wishing for the end of the world, or what is their real motivation?
I think you summed it up very well. I would add, we are looking. I'll speak for myself, but I know I speak for a lot of the people who are in our camp. I do want honesty, and I want something that's built on a sound foundation. But I'll tell you right now, it's going to be nothing like what we have currently. The only way the system is held together is through lies and treachery and deceit. And that's the only way this system has lasted for so long. I mean, I would go back to the beginnings of the Federal Reserve System in 1913 and even kind of before that. But the only reason that it has lasted is because they lie, they cheat, they steal. And then I think about 50 years ago, it came to the point where it's like, well, everything is so distorted now, we can't stop. Because if we stop, half the population will probably die in this transition. And that's just a reality. If you don't have food, water, power, security, we haven't been trained for this. We haven't been trained to live on our own and be self-sufficient. And that's the scariest thing about this transition. And it is what they've used over the last, 5-6 decades to scare our politicians and the leaders of the United States, as at least the leaders that we can see. They have scared them into not making this move, not pulling back the curtain and keeping everybody in the dark. But there's so much information coming out right now. Do you want to live in an honest society, even though it will be nothing like what we're living in today? I mean, we're not going to care about our gold and silver investments in 10 years. There will be no investments. There'll be no stock market. I mean, it's all a fraud. You've got 300 million failure to delivers every single day. That's, people think they own their 401k and they own the stocks and they own the certificates that they hold in their hand. These are all derivatives that have been rehypothecated 1,000 times each. And yes, you may have a legitimate claim to a part of a mining company because you own a share, but there's 1,000 other people who have just as a legitimate claim as you do. And unless the full system keeps going, you're not going to be able to cash that thing in. Everything, and I mean everything, is going to be very different. Now, the question lies that is it going to be a peaceful transition to that different world that is built on honesty and trust and belief in your leaders and belief in yourself, or will it not be a peaceful transition? Will there be war? Will there be civil war, which I think what I would call the bad guys are trying to foment around this election in the U.S. It's insane what's going on. The possibility and the potential for civil war, I'd say, is like over 50% chance that the United States will be in civil war by the end of the year. Just because I know people on the Trump side and I know people on the Sanders side, and it's like both sides are so dug into their position and so against the other side that if either one of those sides is elected, I don't think Hillary will make it unless the bad guys win, as I call it. But if Trump gets in, or if Sanders gets in, the other side of the nation will be up in arms, literally. And can the nation survive another civil war? I don't think so. At least not in the formation that we have. I am hoping that saner heads prevail, and we do open the kimono and tell everybody, hey, this has all been a lie. Everything you've learned about, you've been taught, the investment parameters that you've been instructed to invest in over time for your retirement has all been a lie. And when everybody tries to back out of that lie or everybody sees that lie, the whole thing comes crumbling down. Now, there's nothing stopping the people who will take over from saying, all right, we're going to have a moment of revelation. We will tell everybody everything. We'll tell you all about the false flags, who did it and why they did it. We'll tell you everything about rehypothecated investments. We'll tell you what happened to the U.S. gold. Do we have any? Do we not have any? We'll tell about all the trillions and trillions and quadrillions of dollars that are just created out of thin air, and nobody's told about it. They're electronic blips. Everything will be revealed. That's the only way to go forward as far as a peaceful, transition. Otherwise, I think we're completely screwed.
So in the past, you've talked about some of the direct impacts that are possible or likely to individuals' financial situations in the case of an economic collapse of our existing house of cards. I think we've talked about, savings accounts or retirement accounts, taking a haircut or being nationalized, that sort of thing. What do you think are bringing it down to very specific individual impacts on the individual person? What do you think are some of the most likely things that people would likely see at some time, if not by this fall, then sometime soon?
Well, if I had talked about in the past about, haircuts or nationalization or anything like that, I've come full circle now in understanding that these large banks are going to go down completely, and when they go down, you're going to have a freezing because they have no cash. They're leveraged 15-1, and when they lose like 5% of their tier 1 capital, the whole thing is gone because of the leverage and because of the derivatives. The derivatives is the kicker, and I think the Brexit might even trigger that in the coming months, because it takes about a month for derivatives to be settled. So mid-July, we could see some serious problems. But if the banks go down, there is no savings account. There is no checking account. There is no federal government funds. I mean, everybody keeps their money, what we call money these days, in the banks. And, there will be no power. There will be no means of transacting business. There will be no gasoline for your car. The ramifications of something like that, money is the lifeblood of the way our society is built right now, unfortunately. And this won't be true in the future. I think in the future we'll go back to an agrarian society where people, they have their own farm and they have their own neighborhoods and families, and everybody will live in small communities. But to go from here to there is going to be crazy chaotic, because we're used to having our ATM card working and our credit card working, and we're used to going to the grocery store and having food on the shelves. The banks go down, that's not going to happen. You're not going to have food on the shelves, and you're not going to have ATM cards that work, and you're not going to have a gas station. You're probably not even going to have any kind of media for a while either. The TVs can't work without electricity, and electricity doesn't work without natural gas or nuclear power, and that doesn't work without employees getting paid by a private entity or a public entity. So yeah, we're in for a huge transition, and I know we're not prepared for it. I can guarantee you nobody is prepared for it. Even if you're a reluctant prepper and you've done all the things that people said, oh, you're crazy to keep a couple months worth of food and gold and silver and all that. Well, that'll get us by for a couple months. But after that, you're in with everybody else. And most likely, all your neighbors will come over to your house. And there's a great Twilight episode where there's a scare of a nuclear fallout, and this one prepper guy goes into his basement and locks himself in the door, and all his neighbors come there, and they bash down the door, and it turns out to be a false alarm, but it's true. I expect everybody to be knocking on my door. Anybody who's a prepper out there, everybody's going to knock on their door because they know you got it. They know you've prepared, and they have a life and death situation with their family. So, it's one of those things. You're going to either have to hide away so nobody knows where you are, or you're going to have to deal with all these people coming to you. Maybe you can help them out maybe everybody gets fed for a week, and that's it. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to be in this together.
We've traveled quite a bit across the country, and you can't help but noticing in such places as Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, large Amish communities and Mennonite communities where you can go on for an entire county, and almost all the places you see have no power and haven't for a century or whatever, and they've got life going on, and they've got many generations. You see the kids walking to school, and you see the people traveling together in their horses and buggies and that sort of thing. So for some places, the transition is one they did voluntarily a long time ago. We worry about them because if they have a religious adherence to a non-resistance, and how vulnerable. You mentioned people come knocking on your door. If people know that's where the food is at, that's it's going to be tough for everyone, as you mentioned, no matter where you find yourself. And other guests have talked about in that kind of an environment, then like, for example, our activist farmer, Joel Salatin from Polyface Farm, has talked about really getting in deep relationships with your neighbors, your friends, people in your community, so that you build skills and networks of helping each other, because if times get tough, you have those relationships and you continue to help each other.
That's a great thing to take to heart, especially because, after a while we're all going to be in the same situation, and your neighbors are not now, they're probably just your friends and acquaintances, but pretty soon you'll be relying on them for their skill sets, and it's so much easier to protect a neighborhood of, say, 500 people to 1,000 people if you're all working together and everybody has duties, because the world is not going to be the way it was when the banking system was flowing happily. It just is not going to work that way anymore. And that's what we all have to kind of get our heads around is, the Amish way of life might pretty much sum it up for a long time. I would say there are other potential outcomes, but to take care of ourselves, we need food, we need water, we need shelter. And we don't need, traveling the world. We don't need big cities. We don't need a lot of things. A lot of people can have a backyard that they can plant a garden in and share and trade vegetables and things like that. That can happen. And it probably would be a lot happier life, not as chaotic, obviously. But there's a lot of bad things that need to be washed away. And that's what this transition is all about, washing away the Monsantos of the world and the big banksters of the world and the phony monetary system. But then at the end of the day, we're left with ourselves and our friends and family and neighborhoods. And, we're smart, we're adaptive, we can grow our own food, we can source our own water. It's just going to be very different than what we're used to.
As a parent and now a grandparent, when I reflected some more on that viewer's question about, please don't wish for the end of things, it made me think about when a child gets a big bad thorn stuck in underneath their skin or something, or you see that a bad scraped knee that's been neglected has become infected and a pussy scab or swollen blister has developed. That something, you can't just leave it alone. The child pleads with you, just leave it the way it is. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. It's they know it's tender and it hurts more if you deal with it. But as a parent or as a grandparent, that the only way to get back to true health is it's got to get worse before it gets better. You've got to somehow re-break that skin to get that big thorn out of there, or whatever it is. You've got to, pierce that swollen, infected thing so you can drain it, and you put some antibiotic on there and get a bandage on there. But you have to be honest with, you can't just let the bubble continue to stretch and think that's comparatively less painful than the cleansing. That's not really the way to true health. Is that what you're getting at when you're talking about we have to let the unhealthy growth of the Monsantos and the derivatives and everything, they've got to be healed. You can't get back to health unless you get rid of those things first. So there will be pain.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, and I agree 100%. Our problem now, obviously, is that we've been putting this off for so long, and the longer you wait, just like that, thorn in his finger, it's going to get infected the longer you wait. So it's we're massively infected right now and on the brink of dying, literally, on many levels. But this transition it's been long talked about, long prophesized, actually, for both the U.S. and I think the U.S. kind of leads this game that they're playing. If we can break free and set an example for the rest of the world, I think the rest of the world can break free as well. It's not going to be easy, and I guarantee you life afterwards will be very, very much harder than it is right now, but it will be an honest system. It will be getting rid of these people who have abused us for so long. And, there's a long and happy future ahead of us if we can shed these evil people who have literally been poisoning us and destroying us. So I'm hopeful for the future. It's not going to be an easy transition. And even when we get past the transition, it's not going to be an easy life, but it will be an honest life and a free life.
Why is it reasonable to think that if these power seekers and power centers that have persisted through generations, the Federal Reserve is 100 years old, that was based on the model of European central banks and so on, that went hundreds of years before that. A lot of these big moneyed families, people talk about, Rothschilds and on, that have been around for many, many generations and don't have any real allegiances to any one sovereign nation, or no real patriotism, but just self-seeking and self-serving and idealism about world ruling and people being dependent on them, that sort of thing. Why in the world is it realistic to think that the end game of the collapse of finally, the parasite kills the host? You'll say the host collapses. Why is it realistic to think that the parasite isn't going to be smart enough, strong enough to be several moves ahead in this game and just bounce right back and have people all be in serfdom afterwards? Why do you personally seem to adhere to this optimistic view that the collapse of the existing system and existing power structure and existing orders is going to lead to somehow a better situation for the common person who seems to be so ignorant and so uninformed and just kind of going out of reactive mode rather than where is that optimism come from on your part?
Well, I like to say that we have a chance. It's going to take us standing up, and it's not going to be easy. But there is a chance. There are people working to do that. I'm working to do that. You're working to do that. But there are people higher up within government, even within the Federal Reserve Bank, that are working to do that. Now, the bad guys got it easy. All they have to do is stand back. They have been our nanny for over 100 years. All they have to do is stand back and watch us fall on our face, which we will. And there's no doubt about it. They run everything for us. They feed us, they clothe us, they give us water and food and power. But when their plan, I believe, is to stand back this year and let us suffer for a year and a half before they come in and say, we'll take over. But there are people working to say, when this collapse happens, we are going to take over and take responsibility for our own lives. It'll be very different. It won't be, what we've been living, but it will be an honest way of living and an honest way of life. And in that scenario, what happens is there will be, let's call them truth commissions, where we will take the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all these evil players and Cheney and Bush and the Clintons, and we will try them for their crimes. That will be a huge part of it, because otherwise they'll just go into hiding for a couple of years and then come back and control us. So it definitely includes the kind of judgment day for these people who have rigged our markets and controlled our lives for so long.
And in that new world where people have an opportunity, a chance to start a new direction, how much of the requisite fiber and backbone and training of a life oriented towards self-responsibility and accountability and taking responsibility for yourself, how much of that do you think is still left in our culture? Do you think it will come up from the embers because the opportunity, people will rise, human nature will respond? Because it seems like in the last couple generations, people talk about the World War II as being the greatest generation, where you had this heroic virtue of self-sacrificing service and that sort of thing for a greater good. And then how the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, on it, just every decade just became more and more self-indulgent, self-absorbed, to where, now most of the photos being taken are selfies, and most of the people that are spending their time just glued to a single screen in front of their face rather than talking to each other and that sort of thing. So how much do you think that the ashes of that will collapse, and that somehow people's character, that you can rewire or reinvigorate or re-inspire the character that's nearly been lost of a culture because of the depth of the challenge that they'll be facing? Will human nature draw that out of us in face of that?
I think it's both. I think some people will thrive in the environment and some people will die. I mean, literally, a lot of people will end up dying because, and I write about this in my book, we have been taken care of our whole lives. And and you can blame the bad guys all you want, but at the end of the day, you're in charge of your own life. You chose to live this life and this experience, and hopefully, the majority of us will make it through. But there will be people who lived in their mother's basement and lived off EBT cards and play video games all day. Maybe they got these great skills from playing Modern Warfare 3, but the reality is, most people will not survive this transition because they're not willing to do the work. But there are a lot of people who are willing to do the work, and they'll take care of some of those other people for a while. But everything will be different. If we're going to get rid of these people who control our lives, the control is gone. So, it's going to come down to the individual. I do think a lot of us will be able to rally and be happy about it and thrive in that environment, but a lot of us will not be able to and won't make it. So, it's not going to be pretty.
You mentioned in your book, can you tell us what the title of that book is and what exactly it is that it covers?
It's called The Silver Lining. It's the fourth book in a series I've been writing, and the first three are pretty much about how we got here and the manipulation of gold and silver and our lives and all that. And then for some reason, the fourth book came out more about what happens after the crash and after we allow the nanny state to walk away or push them away. Are we ready really to take over and be responsible for our own lives in every respect? It gives some hopeful parts to it, but in the majority of it, it says, "Hey, we're out there on our own once we do this." So, it's something I'm looking forward to happening, and I talk about that in the book. But it's also going to be the biggest challenge of our life after the bad guys go away. And so really interesting time we're living in. I think there's a lot of eyes on us on Earth and outside of Earth saying, let's see how these people do and see if humanity can pull up their bootstraps and move forward. In that,
do we pit ourselves against each other as a society if we aren't on the same page? I think in terms of the labor movement of the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, where you had just horrific, dangerous working conditions, long, torturous hours, people being separated, child labor, husbands and wives not being able to be with their children or each other because everybody's working these long hours, and then finally the labor unions and labor movement said we've got to have some amount of parity here in terms of the influence over how these decisions get made. But then if you've got strike breakers and people that are willing to go along with whatever management wanted, then there can be a huge, basically a civil war between the workers themselves, the camp the faction that wants to unite for better working conditions or whatever, and the ones that say let's just make do and get by. So in that world, if you have a portion of the population that says, look, let's just get back to the nanny state, I liked it better that way, does that undermine, does that basically sell out and sell into the powers that be that need dependent masses to prop up their power structure? And does that make it harder on those who say, no, we need to get off this drunken binge that we've been on and take responsibility for ourselves? Do you see a lot of conflict directly at the grassroots level between those two camps of thinking?
I think they're trying to foment that conflict. They're trying to make it, pit two sides against each other. There is a future, I believe, in which both sides go forward. The kind of the self-sustaining people go out into the country and make their way, and the cities rely on the big brother to come in and take over the city centers. It is possible that's part of the Civil War. The controlling people within the city versus the people in the country fighting for their liberty or to be left alone and to be able to start again on a smaller scale. All these things are kind of in the cards for us, and depending on how what decisions we make, that will kind of lead us in what future we're going to live through. So yeah, it could go either way, I think. Over
the past decade, I, as even a casual observer of American cinema, have noticed just this preponderance of post-apocalyptic type future movies. I could just sit here and start rattling them off from, they get the whole genre about zombie apocalypse, World War Z and I Am Legend and all that stuff and Walking Dead. And then you've got the whole thing about, it's going to be about whether it's going to be this capitalist tyranny like Hunger Games and that sort of thing, where you've got the, like you said, the city where all the big money and all the high, you have a chance of being on the gravy train if you're in the city, but if you're out in the country, then you're just a slave serf kind of lifestyle. As you think about it, and this is just to make a graphical analogy for people, is there any movie that from any decade that you can think of that most clearly evokes some of those images that you think are likely to be in our future, about the dynamics in a post-collapse culture?
It's hard. I'm not in the camp of the Mad Max. It could end up like that if there is a total collapse and I've been talking a lot about coming together and agreeing on a single president or on two presidents. I've been saying, let's get Trump and Bernie Sanders together. That's our only survival, because otherwise you're going to have half the country in revolt. So, but the likelihood of that is very slim, and I understand that. And there's all kind. It's interesting that all these movies are coming out now, and the Hunger Games obviously is kind of symbolic of what one of our potential futures. And there are a lot more movies like that coming out. And if you read The Road or saw the movie The Road, that's kind of even darker than Mad Max's world. I think that is more of a reality if there is a world war or humanity loses its ability to work together. I would say the life that is represented in The Road would be pretty much what we'll have to live through. But I am the eternal optimist, and I think optimism plays a part in this also, and creating a future and making the choice, choosing how you want the future to unfold is a big part. And it's. The only thing you have to fear is fear. Fear itself is a great quote, but it might be true in that if we really do manifest our own destiny, I think there's potential for a good thing to come of all this. It won't be easy getting there, and it won't be the same when we get there, but it'll be a whole lot better than living under the repression, even if it's subliminal, that we're living through now.
That's a very interesting point you just touched on, is some people saying even what would be considered a poorer life, but free, is far superior to what would seem like a more comfortable life if you're not free, if you're enslaved and you're dependent and you're subject to the whims of some overlord kind of class. And that's where maybe it's another glimpse of what may be underlying people who are wishing not for the end of the world, but for the end of this illusion of where we think we're surrounded by free choice as consumers, but in fact we're given very few choices, and a lot of people feel like I owe, so off to work I go, and they feel like debt slaves, and they feel like they have to do a 9-to-5 job and this and that and the other, and but those paradigms are breaking down, and I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's quite possible that people will start to perceive the true goodness in a free life, even if that life is objectively at a quote unquote lower material standard of living than we're currently enjoying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it will come down to people after the crash demanding honesty, demanding integrity in everything, not just, what you expect from your kids, what you expect from your government. Take Hillary Clinton, for example, has lied every step of the way and continues to lie, and people put up with it. And the future will not be stood for. We will demand that our public servants be just that, servants of the public who tell the bone truth at all times. And these trading companies, if an exchange starts up again, there will be no hidden books and hidden trading records and no high frequency trading. It's all false, and it's all manipulative. And in the future, if we ever open an exchange again for the silver, and I write about this in my book, I give 18 things we need to do to bring back a free market in silver. One of the biggest things is open and honest books. You're going to know who dumps 1 billion ounces of silver on the market. It'll say J.P. Morgan just dumped 1 billion ounces of the silver on the market. Here's the price they did it. Here's the reason they did it. And no trades will happen unless they're open and honest. And that's the future if we want to rebuild the system. But I'd give it a 10% chance that there will be freely traded markets, at least the kind of markets that we know today in the near future, in the next couple of years.
Well, you've opened a very rich topic when you start talking about real truth and bone simple honesty and that sort of thing, because we are so distorted and far from that. You've described things that happen in the financial world that are based on dishonesty. You've mentioned specific political figures that have built a career on dishonesty. But our very language, the hot button issues of what is a family, what is marriage, what is male, what is female, what is my truth, your truth, is it relative or is it fixed? All of those things have been thrown into a view where it's considered, it's politically incorrect to even think specific thoughts or to hold unchanging values, that sort of thing. So we've been told to adopt a completely relativistic worldview where truth is optional and subjective. And so how do you even, once you've trained a generation or two of young people out of the ability to even think rationally, think clearly, use logic, understand the difference between false arguments and emotional appeals, to understand that there is such a thing as objective truth, don't we have our work cut out for us if we're going to try to get back to a society that's built on objective truth and natural law?
Yeah, definitely. And I talk about in the book again, we have a ton of work ahead of us. It's unbelievable. I mean, just deprogramming everybody from the mind control programs that have been built into our society and our minds from the day we were born. We've been indoctrinated, and it was completely done on purpose. It was completely planned and executed according to the plans of those who wanted to do it. And yeah, it will take either deprogramming or the complete exposure of what was done to us. I mean, that's the biggest deprogrammer ever. You tell somebody this is what is being done to you, and this is why it is not good, and then people will get angry and they'll get mad and they'll demand that these people are put in jail, if they're lucky. That kind of stuff will be coming, and I'm a big supporter of all the lies of the past. I mean, I talk a lot about Greenspan in my writings because I believe he had a secret agenda of trying to destroy the dollar to get us back onto a gold standard, but it was done with lies. It wasn't done with honesty. And that I mean, he's kind of a pseudo hero in my book in that he'll get us back to honest money, but he had to lie, cheat, and steal to get us there. And is that good? Is that bad? I think it is. It has been brutal on the people who had to live through the last 30 years. And I blame people like Greenspan and people who perpetuated the lie.
Well, Bix, I think we've done I've really appreciated you exploring these topics with us, because it's a angle that we rarely delve into with sufficient attention, and it really is foundational to everything else that we do. Is the big why of why do we prepare? What is likely to come ahead, and what must we do internally in our own minds and in our own hearts and within our families and with our neighbors to make it through this and come out with our integrity intact, with our consciences and our personhoods really thriving and being all that we were meant to be, all that we were made to be. So if people want to find you and more of your work, where can they do that?
You can go to roadtoruta.com. Got a new book out, and you sign up for free emails about kind of what's happening behind the scenes as we inch our way into this transition.
Well, thanks you so much again, Bix Weir, founder of roadtoruta.com, for being again here with us on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you.